Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shelf Life. This is Simran, and this is my podcast, Shelf Life, where we talk about books, their philosophies, but most importantly, our personal relationship with books. I am so glad to be finally doing this again. I know it's been a minute. I know we've been MIA for, I don't even know, I think it's been a good 2 months now. But I am back now, and the reason why I had been MIA, I'm sure I'll let you know as we go along with the episode. But what I want to start with today is um, I am just so grateful to be back. I'm grateful to be able to do this. I'm grateful to be able to um, have this microphone that still works, to have a recording that is good enough to be put out, and actually just have a recording at all. I am so, so, so grateful for that. I am grateful that you are here, that you chose to be here, that you chose to be listening to this, and I hope that you've been well. I hope you've been well for the past couple of weeks. I hope you've been well for the past couple of months. I hope you've been reading, because we are going to be talking about so many books. We're going to be discussing books that we love, books that we didn't, books that we kind of just read because we had to get over whatever we were going, whatever we wanted to get over. We're going to be talking about books that we read while we were traveling or when we weren't. We're going to be reading about all sorts of things, and we're going to be talking about it, right? Like we've always done. And we're also going to be having a lot of cool people over, like we always do. And they're going to talk about books that they loved, books that changed their lives, books that made them want to get on a train and not look back. We're going to be talking about it all. So thank you so much for choosing to be here. Thank you so much for sticking around. And yes, I am very, very grateful that, no matter what happens, no matter how many months we go by without talking, the best part about having an online community is knowing that it is books that join us together, that bound us together, right? And it's always going to be that. And that's what books do. That's what great art does. That's what any kind of art does, honestly speaking. It just binds people together in ways that we cannot really comprehend, which means that more often than not, there are circumstances that may shift us. There are circumstances that may just blow us off our feet, that might really temper with the ground beneath our feet. But there are still things that bind us together. There are still things that can never be shaken, that do not waver. That could be your faith, that could be love, that could be stories, that could be good stories that we just imprinted on our souls. So yeah, we're going to be talking about all of these things, and I am very, very grateful for that. Before we get on with this episode, as you've noticed by the title of the video, today's episode is not going to be about a particular book. We're going to, start doing that next week onwards. Today, I just wanted to do a little bit of an introduction again, go back to the basics, which is why we don't even have video for this episode. I just wanted to talk. And I wanted you guys to listen. That's about it. So, I want to start this episode with this poem that I read today. I read it first thing in the morning. Literally, the minute I woke up, I read this. My best friend sent a really cool book to me. a book that we had been meaning to read for a very long time. It's a book of poems. It's by Rudy Franscisco, a poet that we have, you know, discussed on this podcast before in our spoken word poetry episode. He's a poet that I personally really love, and in fact, the guest that we discussed this with, Mansi, who is the best friend that I'm talking about in this context, we discovered our love for poetry and also our love for each other through this particular poet. And we've been, fans of his for a very long time. And I think it almost, in retrospect now, it feels like that pinnacle, that peak of our bond, of our friendship. I don't want to say peak because that probably means it is followed by some sort of downfall, but one of the highlights, probably, yeah, that's a better word. One of the highlights of our friendship, of this time that we've spent together, was watching Rudy Francisco live, watching him perform his poetry live. And it was such a beautiful and emotional moment. I don't think I can ever forget that. We were just sitting on the ground in this really large empty ground, and of course accompanied by a lot of other people all around us, everybody just sitting on the grass with their bare feet, on these really expensive clothes that they had put on, and they just sat on the floor, they sat on the grass, and in the middle of it all, in the middle of the ground, there was a little podium where Rudy stood and he just performed his poems. And the sky was above us. It was a beautiful, beautiful January, wintry evening. The sky was just starting to set. It had that really beautiful golden blue, mix. And yeah, a lot of wind. A lot of wind. The kind of wind that you would mistake for a storm if only you weren't as happy as we were, and as grateful and mesmerized and awestruck as we were. So, yeah, that was the backdrop of one of the most wonderful evenings that I'd had. It was there's a word for it. Sufi poets and a lot of people who engage with Urdu poetry very frequently and who understand that world, they have a word for it. They call it mehfil, right? A mehfil is a gathering. If you had to really translate it, a mehfil means a gathering. It's a gathering of poets. It's a gathering of lovers. Most importantly, it's a gathering of love. It's a gathering meant for love, meant for community, meant for worship. At the core of it, it's worship, right? That's what all poetry, I feel, is all about. It's about worship. We're all writing these songs and these beautiful ballads and sonnets with a desire to connect with a human lover, perhaps, but at the core of it all is this intense, intense longing for God and the need to be one with Him. In fact, a lot of really, really, classic, I think you would call them, a lot of these older poets used to write about this at length. In fact, I think the greatest example of something like this would be Mirabai. Mirabai used to write poems, not poems, she wrote songs. She wrote these beautiful, beautiful songs that were dedicated to Lord Krishna, right? And people say that she was madly in love with Krishna, and she was so mesmerized by his aura, by his presence in her life, by the spirit that that was in her, that she knew was him. She was so crazy about what had happened to her, right? And how she'd been touched, that she chose to renounce the world. She chose to renounce the world of material things, and she chose to devote herself to love and to union, right? Wasl is the word in Urdu. Wasl means union and firak means separation. And these are two concepts that poets usually, oscillate between, and occasionally you will find direct references to either one of them, but mostly it's just a mixture of both, because that's what love really is all about. It's about union and separation. And that's what true devotion is all about as well. It's about how we've been yoked out of that perfect union with God, and now we exist here on this world, in this world, wanting to be one with Him again. So, that was a really roundabout way of saying that all of these poems, right? Everything that we do, everything that we are doing, even here, and everything that happened that evening when Mansi and I heard Rudy Franscisco for the first time, it's all connected. It's all in a very weird way, just connected. And sometimes, that kind of connection, that kind of eternal binding, right? That kind of eternal just connection that can be, it can feel suffocating, I guess. Perhaps if we live in times like COVID, where, the biggest problem is the fact that we're all connected, right? The biggest problem is the fact that all of us are responsible for each other. What we do affects another person every day, every minute. If we are careless, we affect the ones we love, even affect the ones we don't love or we don't even know. And that is because we are connected. How do you find the beauty in something like that? How do you find a sense of peace and joy in that sort of perpetual connection? How do you make a mehfil out of something that feels so suffocating? How do you rejoice in pain? How do you rejoice in desperation? How do you rejoice in boredom? How do you rejoice in, feeling lost? So many of our traditions, so many of our poetry talks about, so much of poetry talks about that. About rejoicing in the madness of love, about rejoicing in the desperation of love, rejoicing. That is the key word here. Even the Bible talks about it. In fact, the last couple of months for me have been really trying to understand what God has been speaking to me and why He's been saying the things that He's been saying, why He's been doing the things He's been doing. And it's also been a lot about reading, going over poems and poems that I might have written, that I might have read over the course of my life, just analyzing all of it. And understanding that at the core of it is this massive dilemma that we cannot seem to move forward from. And what is even moving forward? So yeah, I think all of this sort of, woke me up in a very pensive mood today. And I think just remembering all that, feeling all of that in, keeping that somewhere inside me, it led me to this poem that I read this morning. It's a poem about, I think, probably everything that I was feeling. And even when I was thinking of all of these things and these big lofty things to think about, it's quite safe and secure to know that we can have all these narratives, these grand narratives in our head, but when we move out of it, when we move out of our own minds, when we look at the world outside, how pretty it is, how beautiful it looks. Just that morning sky, that little gleam of sunshine, warm and pleasant and homely, like a mehfil. Rudy Franscisco writes in his poem, "Good morning. Get out of bed. The day has been asking about you. It dragged the sun into your room this morning, pulled an entire disco of light through your curtains, hoping that all of this gleam would be enough to get your attention. This is how today says, notice me." It's so comforting to know that no matter what happens, the sun still shines, the birds still sing, the wind still blows in any direction it wishes to. We are all just atoms trying to fight against the wind when we're supposed to be flowing with it. How beautiful to know that we are part of a mehfil, always, at all times, in every way possible. We are all connected. I think I just wanted to sit with that silence for a little bit. And I think I want to read out another poem from Rudy. In Horizon, he writes, "I hope I haven't already driven past my greatest moments. I hope there is something beautiful on the horizon that's just as impatient as I am. Something so eager it wants to meet me halfway. A moment that is diligently staring at its watch, trembling with nervousness, frustrated and bursting at the seams, wondering what's taking me so long to arrive." And aren't we all just doing that? Aren't we just, holding out, waiting for the horizon, that beautiful little sunset to show us our way, to show us where to go, to show us the map, to give us the answers? We're all just hanging in there right now. That's what I did for 2 months when I was not doing these podcasts, in fact, that's what I've been doing all year. These 2 years, just been hanging in there. And sometimes that's powerful. Sometimes it's powerful to exist softly, to not be loud, to just breathe and exist. Sometimes that is so powerful. And sometimes it's powerful to stand up, to raise your voice, to sing, to yell, to make noise, just noise. That's why we have these really beautiful, staccatos and legatos and all of these musical terms, which at the core of it, all it means is that we have these great big highs and these really low lows, even when we're singing a song, especially in classical music. If you had to look at it, Indian classical, Hindustani in fact, even ghazals have these really high highs. The singer in all his intrepid courage takes a really big leap of faith and hits that high note, hits that note just outside the range, just pushing it, just, pushing that boundary. And he hits it, and then he knows he needs to come down. The very next second, he needs to climb down. He needs to make that way down, even if it means falling flat on his feet. He needs to get down the high horse. And that's what he does. He hangs out there with the low nose, and then he climbs up again slowly. It's all a process. It's all just one thing at a time. You get the highs and then you get the lows. And I think it's so difficult to really accept that, isn't it? To accept that with the highs come the lows, with the lows come the highs, with every sort of shift in nature, with every sort of shift in the time, the wind, we have to move with it. That's all we get to do. We don't get to choose how to change. We are not God. We don't get to choose what to do. We just need to move. That's why the whirling dervishes whirled. They whirl with the wind. They don't whirl against it. If you've ever noticed. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can always, look it up. Just look up whirling dervishes of Turkey. It's a really old tradition that I possibly will talk about, sometime later in some of the other episodes. A tradition that was popularized by Jalaluddin Rumi, who is, of course, the great mystic Sufi poet that we all love, who features quite regularly in a lot of Bollywood songs now. Also is an inspiration to a lot of Western poets, I must say. A lot of spoken word poets as well. But yeah, it was something popularized by him, and of course he didn't start it. It was started by many, many men who came before him. But the idea is to just, let loose your hands, let loose your limbs, ground your feet really strongly wherever you are. It's not to fly, it's just to move. It's to move with the wind. You don't have to fly. You just need to move. You just need to keep moving wherever the wind takes you. So powerful to do that. So important to do that. And yeah, today's episode has just been about... It's been quite random, honestly. I've been, as you might have noticed, been talking about just anything and everything that came on my mind. I didn't really plan out how this would go. I didn't really write down notes anywhere, but I knew that I wanted to share these couple of poems with you, and I knew that I just wanted to talk about just things that have been on my mind, and I hope that you can do the same. I hope that you write in telling me about your day, how you've been minding your mind and the world around you. So yeah, just let me know. I will always be open to hearing you out. And yeah, I think right now it's a beautiful evening calling out to me, and I should be getting going. I should move. That's never gonna change. I'm always gonna make these little weird grammatical errors when I'm speaking. Even though I have this thing and I have this podcast, I'm still gonna be making these mistakes and hoping that you don't mind. But yeah, a beautiful evening is calling me and I should be moving. I figure I'll sit down to write a little, or perhaps I'll do a little bit of yoga, calm myself, calm my mind down, really be one with the world around me, and possibly, move from there. We'll see where it goes. Before I leave you guys, I just want to read out a poem that I wrote a couple of years ago. I think I wrote this 2019. Yep, I wrote it 2019, and when I wrote it, in fact, a little bit of story before I get into it, I wrote it for a friend. I wrote it for a very important person who was going through a little bit of a rough patch. Um, but I remember, feeling a lot of what I had written for myself as well. So I thought that I had actually, it felt like I had written it for myself. It felt like I was talking to myself. And that's what happens when you write, even when you read sometimes. Um, you think it's for someone else, but it's really for you. It brings something out of you, it pours something out of you that was bottled deep inside and needed to be out. It lets out that little bit of devil that was inside you and frees up space, frees up those bones, frees up those organs, just makes more space for your heart, makes more space for your soul, for those beautiful little things inside you. So I wrote this poem thinking about her and wanting to read to her, and I did. But I knew that I was reading it for myself as well. So I'm just gonna read it out. And I addressed it to, you know, uh, my friend. But this is for you. If that is how it feels, if that's what you're needing right now, this is for you. Look outside your window. Look at how the world is beginning again. Look at how the gulmohar tree dances and sways in its own fragility. Look at how everyone is thankful for the sun, even when it's blinding, and raw, and unapologetic. Look at how your garbage man, a struggling DJ by night, still shows up to work every morning. Look at how he dreams, how he learns to fly in his old, wearied Bata shoes. Look at how the cars still work, how the woman who sells raw fish takes her seat under the gulmohar and does not budge in its scent. Look at how she views the world, like a hungry customer. Look at how the old uncle walks towards her, limping because of the fall he had last week. Look at how he's back to work again, at his fearlessness and refusal to be bogged down by time. Go outside, Gulmohar. Stand under the sun. Let the noise fill you up. Look at how the world is beginning again. That's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you are having a good day. I hope before the day is over, I hope you get your things sorted, get whatever it is that you wanted to get done. And I hope you just take some time out for yourself. Read a book, catch up on some poetry, some songs, whatever it is that you like to do. Get a nice cup of coffee, get a nice cup of tea, or just water, or if you're someone like me, get a cup of haldi water. Or not, you could just, chill. You could pray a little, that's what helps me. You could write a little, you could paint or draw, let your mind free, let it race however it wants to race. Don't judge it, let it move. I hope you're having a good day and thank you so much for joining in. I'm gonna see you next week with a brand new book review. After that, we're gonna be jumping into some new episodes and let me know what you thought of this one. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you.